All right, everyone, welcome. Here we are into the next segment after Chris Avalone, who was an amazing guest. That was a really fun conversation. We are on to Liam,
I'd hate to
this
follow that guy. Hey,
this
what?
this silly man from Australia that I know. Dude, thank you so much for joining us.
Pleasure.
Liam is someone I met many years ago. We were working on Ranger.
Ranger, yeah, that game that never existed.
Yes, exactly. It was a tech demo. Don't you remember, Liam? It was a tech
It,
demo.
that was a tech demo for Gears of War, I think. Yeah, that sounds right.
But yeah, we met each other. I think it's still my favorite story. We could talk about it later, but we met playing a
Yeah,
board
for
game,
sure.
and we've stayed in touch over the years.
Dude,
Liam's an actor, but we're going to get into today some things that maybe people don't know about you, which is that you are also a big game designer, which I think
also
is,
insane. No.
yeah, I love
Yes.
that. I love it. It's a really cool thing. But Liam, why don't you introduce yourself however you want? I'll give you the space. Go for it, man.
I'm Liam McIntyre. I'm a big dork. I don't know. I have two kids and a wife, and I live in America right now because it's been a whole experience. I don't know. I've done a bunch of cool acting stuff. I don't know. I wanted to be an artist my whole life, and then like my dad was like, maybe not that, and I was like, yeah, you're right. There's not much money, and then went to like banking for a couple of years, and went, no, my soul's not in this, and then yeah, I guess tried acting, got lucky, and then I got into that Spartacus thing, and then from there it was just a bunch of cool stories. I got to play all kinds of crazy cool things
Yeah.
that the people that I always dreamed of playing, whether that be on stage or with Shakespeare and stuff like that, or like I got to play Aquaman. That was wild. So like it's yeah, live. I've been one of the lucky ones. So yeah, it's been a busy, crazy old life.
That's good, man. Well, yeah, I mean, you've had kind of a crazy couple of years too with moving back and forth. I was always tracking your
Yeah,
movements as you trotted the globe, and I don't know what the hell you were up to half the time.
it sounds like that Taylor Swift guy with the jet.
Yes,
But yeah, no,
exactly.
I was all over them. We were between COVID and like jobs and children and not knowing what kind of life we want for them and
Mm,
what that means. We were going back from like we went to Australia because we were like Aaron was homesick and COVID was happening, so we went there and that didn't feel right. So
mm.
we just moved back and I think we're set now. I mean, I said
Yeah.
that before, so yeah, but I think we're good. I think we're
I
happy. So,
we're very similar souls that way. I mean, I've moved how many times in the
nomads.
last? It's been
Yeah, you've
ridiculous.
moved a ton. Yeah, I mean, there's nomads.
But no, that's maybe as you get older, you get a little restless, and some people settle down, some people just keep moving. But hopefully,
Yeah, I guess that's good.
yeah, yeah. So okay, I never heard that story that you started in banking. That's new to me. What was that all about?
I can't believe I haven't told you. No, I all through school since like that, like Harry's what? He's like 4.5. So since about that age, I was like all about painting. That's all I wanted to do. Fine art. I was just 100% that
Wow.
till like the year before we finished school with like the business end of school where it was kind of like pick the subjects that'll get you into college or
Mm,
university. And then Dad was kind of like, I don't know about like, you sure you should be doing painting? Like, I
yeah.
don't know if that's a job. And I was like, oh no, I'm good at it. And he's like, I mean, yeah. Anyway, he said, yeah, look, he was being a responsible dad, being like, you should do something that doesn't leave you
Right.
destitute. And he was like, ah, oh, come on, I'm young and stupid. I don't need to worry about that, do I? But anyway, like, I was always a bit risk averse. So I was like, yeah, you're right. I was good. I was good at like I wasn't good at maths, but I was good
Hmm.
at like thinking. I could think business, and it was kind of interesting. It was had a weird like creative. The creative part of business is really fascinating, like making businesses and try to work out kind of how money works and how you can make it work and stuff like that. So there was a part of my creativity that was like, oh, that's interesting, and I can make money. You say. And so like I did that. I did a commerce degree. So what I did commerce and arts, thinking that arts was art because obviously I do a lot of research into choosing my life
Right.
choices. Um, so when I got to the university I got into, I was like, oh, double degree, that's great. I'll do both degrees at once. What a champion. And then I was like, cool. So where's the art at? And they're like, oh no, arts doesn't mean art. That's please, it means like literature and philosophy. And I was like,
Right.
that's not art. You can't paint philosophy. I mean, that's obviously wrong. But yeah, so I like yeah, so I was like, I should have read about this more. But yeah, so I ended up doing business. I ended up in economics and majoring in that, and then I think I majored in philosophy, which was kind of cool for the art side. And it was in
Nice.
the very last semester of the whole course that I was like trying to find the last thing to fill the gaps in my whatever. And they're like, I need one more course, and they were like, why don't you like do graphic do no do graphic art do comic art? I was like, do what? And they're like, you just one of the if you like art so much, you should do an art course here. I was like, I've been trying for 4 years to do that. And they're
It's
like, well,
amazing.
it was just here. You could have done it the whole time. I'm like, are you joking? For real joking? I was furious. And so I like the last 6 months of my degree in arts was me just drawing cartoons. And I was I was so happy and so angry at the same time. I was like, so this has been here the whole time. I asked these
Wow.
questions. They're like, no, you can't do that. But anyway, it
I didn't
worked out.
I didn't know that. I didn't know that you had done comic, and I didn't know that. That's really
I did,
interesting.
yeah, I did a little bit of comic art. I was not terrible. Could
Huh.
never draw a good hand. Could never draw a good hand.
I think that's
Yeah,
many artists would say
foreshortening. I
that.
was like, so it's, and then you can't see this, but this bit. I'm like, yeah. Anyway, but it was all right. And then yeah, I went into like, got a job. I actually first I got a job at EB Games, and managed that for a while. And I was like, after I was sort of like at the end of the degree, and then I got into banking and was like, yeah, okay. Tell you what, banking was awesome, sort of soul wise, because I was in like a defense bank that for the defense forces, but in like the cities part of the defense forces,
Mm,
and so like they were just, and it was like people who were look, and as I got older, I'm like I can see the appeal of that because you like chaos is not always a nice life choice, but like they were kind of just punching clocks like on their career and on life and everything. It was like every Friday at 3 p.m. the guy'd come in and he'd get his $20 because he had his $20 because he's going to do the thing, and then I'd ask him on the weekend what he doing. He's doing the same thing every weekend.
mm.
And I guess and look again, like I said, as I got older, at this age with the kids and chaos and everything. I'm choosing houses, different countries. I'm like, okay, I can see an appeal in just having a routine that you
Yeah.
just because life is just good, but that's not who I am as a person. Like, so
Yeah.
I always looked at that and was like, oh, please God, never that. So it was weirdly a good motivator for the kind of person I am to go. I don't want to fall into that sort of lull where I just where I was just happy, just boring old happy. No, no, where I was just like,
You need the ups
where
and
I was just
downs.
kind of like doing the same thing all the time. And
Yeah.
so I was it's sort of like as much as I at banking and that sort of like business life wasn't really for me. It was really, I mean, it was really good. I'm the only guy that reads his contracts as an actor that I know, and I'm the only one that knows what his business dealings are because
Nice.
that's what I was taught.
Yeah.
So it was kind of really helpful when I had a bunch of actors that are like, I spent all my money. And you're like, that's bad. No, don't do that. You're like, so, like, that's a terrible choice.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyway, so everything for a reason. I got like a crazy old life, like philosophy of like as my life has gone on at different times, I feel like life is a big story. And at certain points in my life, I was like, oh, wait, so hang on. Chapter one, horrible, this stuff happened, and I didn't
Mm,
understand why. And like any good story, it resolves in time. It doesn't happen on page one, it happens down the end.
right.
And so you're like, in these little, like, novellas or whatever of my
Mm,
life, different,
yeah.
episodes, issues that you sort of go, oh, that was so that led to this, which led to
Mm,
this, and this is the kind of the ending of that story. Oh, that's amazing. Like so
yeah.
it sort of helped me as life goes on, and life's always got challenges. So
Yep.
as new challenges have popped up, I'm like, well, as bad as this is, and it doesn't make it any less bad. Remember how that other stuff in your life resolved, not always in the most satisfying
Yeah.
way, but in a way that you were like, oh, I can see sort of why it exists and what I got from it and who I became from it. So just bear it out and see where this story goes.
Yeah.
See
That's
what this story tells.
that's interesting. I one of the things that I think one of the contributors I think to us moving a lot was I lacked patience for exactly what you're talking about, right? It's like,
Yeah,
well,
again.
this isn't resolving quick enough. I'm just going to leave this story. I'm going to go over here. that
Yeah,
and that just, I mean, the new things came out of that, and I definitely think a lot of learning in life came out of the move, especially here to Stockholm. Like we
yeah,
finally
yeah.
stopped running. We faced some demons, and we're like, we're gonna tell this story, which it takes patience and I guess like you said, is that understanding that you kind of have to let these things play out a little bit.
If you half read a book, it's kind of unsatisfying always, right?
Yeah, and it's interesting. I've never heard it put that way. That's an interesting way to look at it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
cool. What
I've never said that before. So I was like, that's good. I write that down.
well, yeah, put that on your quote on Twitter, man. You've
Yeah, let's pick that up.
become a guru. We need more of those.
But again, I guess in that weird way, it's like, I mean, even those half-read stories in a kind of a Deadpool way are kind of their own meta story. Whereas
Right.
the lesson for this, for this creative was that they had to finish the story.
Right.
And that's the story.
Yeah.
So it's I guess all things given time. I mean, eventually the book closes on everybody, so your story comes due eventually. So
Yeah.
you're gonna find out what it is.
But it's always interesting too to reflect on the story that the Liam that stayed as a banker. Well, what does that guy look like?
Fascinating. I mean, in telling stories, I always think like because my mom and dad divorced when I was very young, and so dad was always someplace else, and I always missed my dad tons because he's my dad. But it's interesting. For very different personality types, extremely different,
Hmm.
and so I always wonder what like. At every point, like there's so many things. Like if mom had stayed with dad, what's that story? Who do I become in that situation where the influence
Yeah.
of my father is far more, developed? Likewise, my stepdad, who was an amazing father figure in that time, he was only around in my life for a couple of years, but he was a really good human being
Hmm.
and a good man. And at a time in my life where I needed a good male figure in my life, he came along and showed me a way to be that was just demonstrably, didn't try to do anything. I just was like, he seems like he's just helping people and being
Hmm.
nice to people and trying to put good into the world. I want to be like that. That's good. I want to be like that's. I'm proud of that.
Yeah.
And not taking it away from my dad, who's also amazing, but like, it's it was if that hadn't happened in that couple of years when I was turning 13 or whatever it is, 11,
Yeah.
13, who do you become? And if I don't get into that degree, who do you become? If
Yeah.
if I go into if I get into the computer science degree I went for or whatever it might have been, so like
And even like
it's fun exciting doing that.
even generationally too, which is interesting. We've talked about your son and over the years, like how your experiences at that age also have definitely influenced how you're a father, and so that
Yeah,
carries on.
100%. Yeah, and like it's funny. I had this whole another weird thing. It's like I've never even been drunk. I haven't done anything. I'm very square. I'm very boring. But but that weird thing of like a lot of my choices are a reaction to the life I've had, and then I'm like, but I'm very happy with who I am, and then I'm like, is my kid gonna just like get blackout drunk every night because he's like, well, dad's a square. He doesn't get it, man. And I'm like, no, I get it, fine, I get it. I just don't do that. Don't prove me wrong. So I'm like, but it's like I don't have like I have this like stuff in my family that makes me go,
Right.
maybe I don't want to do that. He'll have the opposite of that. He'll have like this dad that's just like under the water stuff, and he'll be like, well, that seems boring, and I'm like, it's not. It's very fun. You can have a lot of fun.
Yeah.
So I'm like, it's all these things. I'm like, who knows where all like again, like the dominoes fall. You can't tell.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think about this kind. I mean, I think as storytellers, we do. We see how
Yeah.
these things spin
What's
off.
the story going to be? Yeah,
Yeah,
totally.
yeah, totally. What you said earlier, this is interesting. You said that you weren't good in math, but I think we can loop this in a little bit towards that you do a lot of game design. In fact, we talked last week, and you were like, "You're the numbers guy," and your friend Dave was helping you out.
Yeah,
He's the story guy.
that says more about Dave not being a numbers guy, I think, than me being a numbers guy. Dave's a story guy and a fantastic one at that, who just got nominated for a WGA award.
Oh,
That just
nice.
came out of nowhere. He's like, I don't know. I'm
Oh,
like,
well
what do you,
done.
I don't know. It's like the coolest thing in the world.
Well
I'd
done.
be like, shrug. I mean, I guess is it good? Who knows if it's good? I'm like, it's good. It's definitely good. Anyway, but yeah, so that's cool news. But yeah, no, I part of the going back to I couldn't do maths to save my life.
Hmm.
It was just such an abstract concept, and I was just like in the same way that it sucks for me. I used to love art, and I'd go into galleries and I'd get to the abstract sort of art section and be like, okay, I mean, it's paint. I get it. But and people be like, oh, but do you see that? I'm like, I don't see it. And I
Hmm.
was like, that sucks for me. I want to see that. I think I'm a bit better at it now, but certainly when I was younger, I was just like, it was all form and figurative for me. I was like, if it doesn't make a narrative, doesn't tell a story in a sort of a
Hmm.
more way. I was kind of like, I don't know. I mean, it just looks red. Okay, Roscoe, I get it. You got red.
Interesting.
You got red. Nice work. But yeah, so like in the same way, math was like confusing to me. I was just like, X1, I don't know why. Who cares? It's just a bunch of letters and numbers. But when I did commerce and I did economics, suddenly it was like $10. Use this, like binomial theorem had like a financial outcome, and I was like,
There's a
oh,
tangible element to it.
yeah. As soon
Yeah.
as it became a thing, I was suddenly like, oh, that makes a ton of sense. Of course, that's how much money you get. That makes a lot of sense. But when it was just X's, it didn't make any sense. So it was
Right.
interesting. Yeah, like so again, like with game design, with creating games, it's funny. Like we now can't. Like I'm a story driven person too, so my instinct is to drive it with story. But I also know that functional stories, and you know this being a D&D guy, like you need some structure to be able to
Yeah.
like form some of like to allow the story to take place in
Yeah.
some way. That's true of writing narratives. I mean, like obviously there are just incredible writers that break narratives and change all kinds of stuff and change the rules, but more often than not, there is
Yeah.
still structure, whether it just be the function of language or syntax, or if it's something bigger and like
Yeah.
it's the three-act structure, or if it's like resolutions or thesis, antithesis, synthesis, all that kind of stuff. There's
Yeah.
still kind of rules within this kind of flowing framework.
Yeah.
So like I like it's interesting. Like Dave in his creating of the story of the games is like, all right, you tell me like let's think of 10 characters that we want to have as our like hero cards,
Yeah.
and then we'll think up abilities for them. And I'm always like, I guess, but like if I don't know what the metrics are for those
Yeah.
abilities, we're just going to be like firing stuff into the dark. But he's right as well, like so like case in point yesterday as we're waiting to find playtesters and find the opportunities to playtest the game we're looking to bring to market first that we've talked about,
Yeah.
um, which is really exciting. I have possibly an ADD compulsion, who knows, to just always change everything forever. And I'm like, instead of ruining everything, I'm going to go and make other games while we wait for this one. It's
Yeah.
been a better strategy.
Yeah. That's a
And
good
so,
idea.
yeah, it's been better. So I made two other games, and I just sort of bring them like while we wait for like artists and other things to come together for the game that we're making. Here's two other things. One is a highly abstracted, like here's a cool bunch of stuff I think would be fun if we can figure out
Yeah.
why it exists.
Yeah.
And it does it looks like fun in a really, but I'm still not sure why anything happens. And the other one was like, let's have a kung fu battle, and it was like, or like like a martial arts fight,
Yeah.
kind of like the Warriors or something. Like everyone comes into a field and has at it. And I made a bunch of mechanics for that, and
Nice.
that looked really fun. But because it inherently has the basis of something you could form a story around.
Yeah.
Dave's much more interested in that and instantly starting to create like.
Yeah.
And because it's a bit of framework, he's building like he's really doing really great work in terms of like now he can structure things because there's a bit of structure on it mathematically to support some of the ideas. Then you can bring a more complete story because you kind of know what you're working with, so you can kind of
Yep.
go, hey, now
Well,
okay, well like he's got to do this, he's got to do that because that
yeah.
will happen.
I think a lot of people, design itself is you mechanizing story like that. That's what
Yeah.
it's the tone, it's the theme. Like what are you saying? Like this lever fills, this lever empties, but like what do those
Yeah.
levers mean, and what's the how does it feel?
Yeah.
Is it
That's why.
heavy? Is it light? Is it what is? And it is so much like especially working in the games industry, it's like every design is telling a story, how hard the punch hits or how high the guy jumps. It's like all those
Or
things
even the
are
mechanics that you're choosing to use. Like
exactly.
some mechanics feel a little unusual in some environments, especially
Yeah.
certainly in video games.
Yeah.
Like where it's much more flowy and interactive.
Yeah.
Some mechanics feel they can be made to you work in your favor, obviously, like
Yeah.
any good system can. But like, yeah, some things you're like, oh, weird choice to do like turn based Call of Duty. I mean, it can work. I guess that's XCOM, but it's like it's
Yeah.
not Call of Duty. It's like the inherent nature of Call of Duty is it's meant to be
Yeah.
gung ho and adrenaline and spontaneous.
Yeah.
Then to constrain that into like a turn-based thing would be
Yeah.
kind of weird. It'd be a different thing. It wouldn't be,
It'd be a
it
different
wouldn't
thing.
be that same. It wouldn't be that game.
Here's
So yeah,
here's a question for you.
Go.
I'm gonna guess that you do, but I'm gonna see. When you're doing a character like for a show or VO or whatever you're doing, do you ever do stats for them or try to create a game out of the
Like
character? Do you ever do that?
roll
Yeah, like
roll stat sheet
this
for
guy
them.
would have like 3 strength, or do you ever think about it in those terms?
Weirdly enough, I don't. I don't actually do that. I mean, maybe in a sort of an obtuse kind of way, but no, I guess I don't.
You do
I
now.
maybe yeah. I mean, it's not a bad idea. No, it's it. I structure my like characters more around like what's their heart saying. So I guess less like like strength obviously colors things and like are you super powerful, are you aggressive? But I think that just leans into me. That leans into who they are as human beings. So if
Mm,
you're extra strong, you're a little more fearless, perhaps, or maybe you have strength because you're so fearful. So time, everything. I mean, everything I do, and if I was more of a D&D player, or if if I'm playing, the story to me, like again, the function, the numbers. And I guess I'd like to think that's true of D&D as well in games like that. The numbers serve to create
yeah.
a human spirit,
Yeah.
like so like he's fast and he's got high dex and he's but he's also he's high wisdom and stuff. So I'm like, oh, okay, so what does that really mean? Like, who
Mm,
does that make? What kind of person would be that?
yeah.
So I guess rather than structure it, I guess a lot of that work, and certainly in scripts, have been done for me. There's some dude who has gone. He's like, high dex and low charisma, and
I mean,
and but
hopefully.
yeah, like, and low charisma and stuff. But you know what I mean. Like these obviously they don't have. I guess my job is past. I feel like it's almost past that already. I'm like, well, someone's already done the stats,
Yeah, right.
so now I need to know why the stats.
What
So like for me, it's more that internal stuff.
so what goes into that for you? Like when there's so many elements to playing a character. Like how do you go about interpreting what you're reading? Like what do you think about when you're doing that?
I I don't know. I feel like I've always been reasonably empathetic, and I just again like I always thought, and I used to have a structured system. Like I remember when I was doing Spartacus, I just I come out of nothing, and
Yeah.
like I'd been 10 years of like different acting classes and some really great teachers, and the greatest of which was really a person who was just feel it and everything works. So there is
Mm.
he was like the no rules guy, and I'd gone through like Ivana Chubbuck's technique and had books and books, and I remember like through a modicum of fear, um, or like of my people pleasing nature, my need to be able because of the horrible scenario of like Andy Whitfield passing away around
Right.
the show and all that stuff. I just was like, I just don't want to ruin this thing that this guy worked so hard to
Yeah.
build, like, and the whole team worked so hard to build. So I went really hard into like a more structured acting thing, which was much more, D12 to hit kind of stuff,
Right.
where like I was going through like different acting techniques and writing them all on the page and building a character that was like very paint by numbers in a way, like at least in the first half of the season.
Okay.
Until the producer, until Rob Tappert, literally was like, "Hey, I want to came into my trailer," like
Let's have
we
a
were
friendly
joking this
talk.
morning. He was like, "We just want to have a talk," and I was like, "Oh, cool." And this is why I'm hurting now because at the time I was like, "Oh, a talk, great! I love talks. I love to look at me. I love talking." And I was like, "Oh, you brought the producing director as well.
Oh boy.
Why? That's unusual." And I was like, "Oh, you look serious."
Oh
But
no.
no, no, they were very supportive because I mean they're invested and then they invested in me and they believed in me. And it wasn't to say they were like, look, you're doing really well, but you know, a lot of like it was funny. Like basically, this whole thing came down to like for reaction shots, I was so in my head
Hmm.
that I was in my head, and
Okay.
and it was weird. Like he would show me a scene, and the scene was fine, but like when I was like listening or reacting to the other actors, like some of the shots, I was just like, and you're like, what's going on? And I was like, and it was funny to me because I'd look at it being like, and I'd look at the page and the notes, like I'd have pages of notes, like so much structural stuff and so much internal working. I remember being like, oh, I'm like
Yeah.
furious, but I'm holding it in and all that stuff. But it's this weird show and tell thing.
Mm.
Emotions aren't so sophisticated as research. I'd never have a chat with you, and if you told me something truly outrageous that I never expected you to say,
Right.
I wouldn't process that in like a, I'm going to make sure I have this feeling and think about that, and that makes me feel like that. I'd just be
Right.
like, the hell are you talking about? And
Yeah.
so it wasn't until the Flash that the part of me that wanted to sort of break free, because again, like, the guy doesn't drink. I'm a very by the books, by the rules guy. Aaron's like, let's just cut into this line. I'm like, we can't do that. There's best example for me and me and my wife, who's much more like freewheeling than I am, is like airport, nobody there, snaking queue to get to the front of the thing. I go through the whole queue, and she just walks around. And I'm like, I mean, it's there for a reason, though. So like that's me, and so but there's a part of me that doesn't want to be that, or doesn't like. I like generally I like that, having that kind of like nice, treat everything with respect the way it's meant to be kind of
Right.
thing. But in the freedom of acting, that is the joy of it, is being
Mm.
able to throw off those shackles of sort of regulating, treating the world in a certain way.
Do you
So
find that
like,
do you find that experience helps you with that part of you that you kind of wish was a little bit more free? Can you express that through the characters that you're embodying?
yeah, I mean, it's like I love playing villains and stuff like that. I'm like, what would not me do?
Right.
you know, and it's weird. Like I don't get a joy out of it. Like, oh man, imagine being this guy. I know it's not incorrect. I do. Like it's like, oh my gosh, how funny to be this crazy psychopath for a few hours. But like it's not like I feel like I need it. Like, it's
Yeah.
like I'm very lucky that on the whole, after a lifetime of like, who am I? I'm pretty happy with who I am, and that's almost
Yeah.
the biggest achievement I think anyone can have. So I feel weirdly pretty at peace with who I am and like the person I am, which is great as an actor, because you are being other people, and that is sometimes dangerous if you
Yeah,
don't
I was
like you.
good. I was gonna say that. I
Um,
mean, you know stories of that where they get too into it, and but that's
well, there's
good though.
that, but also just like like yeah, for that reason, like playing people that you wish you were
Right.
and couldn't be, or something like that.
Interesting. Although I
But
mean, even non-actors do that.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that's some people spend their whole life being that.
Yeah, which
Anyway,
is
like, so like, it wasn't until like the Flash that this part of me that was like, and my old coach, my best coach, and my hardest coach, who was very severe, David Mann, who passed away, rest his soul. Um, he was the guy he would lay into me. He was like, yeah, very intense. A lot of people were just like, I don't want to be part of this.
mm,
And I guess, like, again, we talked about this. I was bullied a lot as a kid,
yeah,
so he had the energy of a bully, but not the spirit of one, if that makes sense. So he
yeah.
would throw stuff at you, but it would be true. So he would say things that were very unkind, but they were honest. And he did it with the intention of like going, you don't do this,
Yeah.
And so it was really hard. And so I understand why people were like, I don't want to have anything to do with that. And I kind of didn't, but I was like, I think you actually want me to be better. And I won't
Hmm.
listen because I'm stubborn and I don't like to look at my flaws, because who does? And he was like, they're in there and you need to figure them out. I remember like one thing he was like, I was always a fat kid as a kid. And he was like, you are a leading man. I was like, don't shut up about that. He's like, you are a leading man and you can't look like this if you want to be a leading man in Hollywood. I'm like, what are you trying to say? And he's like, you're too fat. You got to fix that. And I was like, nobody says that to me.
I need
And
that
like,
guy in my
and I
life.
did not. I mean, my entire life was being bullied for being a chubby kid. So I was like, how dare you? And he's like, I'm not telling you to hurt you. I'm telling you because
Yeah.
I actually think this is like,
Yeah.
he's
Damn.
like, and
Yeah.
ironic, and he's like, you got to be comfortable with taking a shirt off and stuff like that. I'm like, that's never going to happen
Wow.
to
Wow.
me. What's the job I got?
Yeah.
And so like Spartacus was only that. Like my first season was no shirt ever. And so I was like, you son of a bitch. But like it was weird. Like anyway, so like through all of that, and even that lesson itself, I was like, this guy's onto something. And he was truthful. Like it's hard to find people that tell you the truth, even
It's
if it
true.
hurts. And so it wasn't until the Flash that I remember the first episode of the Flash I did, again being the guy that plays by the rules, and I was like, I went up to the writer on set and I was like, hey, I was thinking maybe in this scene for this instead of this, maybe I could do this. And they're like, no, just do it how it's written. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, of course. Sorry, I didn't mean to be disrespectful. Because of course, it's like it's their writers. It's their like they've
Right.
slaved them. It's like some idiot comes up and is like, hey, I got a bunch of ideas. Like I get it. That sucks. But then like the next episode, it was a smaller episode for my character, and I was like, I was feeling a bit cheeky for once in my life, and I was like, I'm going to do something. I mean, what's the worst? I had other people in him as well, being like, what's the worst that can happen? Like, if you, as long as you're not disrespectful and like
Yeah, yeah.
chewing up their day, like like they're like, we got 2 minutes to do the shot. Well, I'm going to do a thing.
Do my bit.
Yeah, like screw you guys. As long as it like comes from the right place, you have a creative voice too, and you're allowed to exercise that
Yeah,
respectfully.
yeah,
And so I just did a thing, and people were like, oh, that was awesome. Moving on, and I was like, that wasn't the thing. Like that was wrong technically. And I was like, oh, so as long as it's good, as long as you like do it wholeheartedly
yeah.
and respectfully, you're allowed to just act. And then from then on, I got way better at my job because I was
Interesting.
like, I put away some of that like step by step by the numbers stuff. Like you still build it from that, but
Yeah.
like I less for me now. And I guess you get a sense of like I just read a whole script. I'm like, so what's this guy about? And then I'm good with language, so I'm like, I think I know what he's about. I
Hmm.
can be that.
Yeah.
Let's go for that. And then it becomes much more of an emotional journey, which I find, again, like people listening don't plan what they're going to say
Right.
usually, or if they do, that's a specific type of person, and that's fine too, if that's who they are.
Yeah.
But most people, once you sort of know what they're about, are they like, are they kind of a bit dozy, or are they a bit dopey? Are they a bit, are they nitpicky? Are they really,
Right.
they gregarious and like fun and personality driven, or really, like structured and like fun police and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And then you can truly just be with someone and just talk to them and have, but once you can structure your sort of try to get the things about you, the person you are, and try to just adjust their position in you.
Yeah.
You're like, when do I get jealous? Well, let's make more of that part of me present. Like the
Uh,
guy that gets, like
Interesting.
anyone that says anything. So when you say something like, "Oh, I just had such a great time with your wife last night," instead of being like, "That's cool," you're like, "Great, what'd you guys do?" And so and it's so like
Yeah.
which is, and that's the for me that's the fun part, and especially with like dark characters, I'm like, when am I really angry? And you're
Hmm.
like, let's put that there and see what that feels like. That's
Yeah.
that's fun. Like that, then you can sort of just play around. Like it's gonna having like a emotional Lego set that you can kind of pull up and put together and take down. And
Interesting.
that's so like rather than looking at it as like stats and things like that, it's really trying to find the bits of myself
Hmm.
and changing their scale in me, and how they and how I prioritize them in my soul and for different
Interesting.
characters.
That's
So that's the
that's
joy.
an interesting insight. I've never thought about that before. I think that would be an interesting way even to approach writing a character. Like, I mean, I think as a writer, there is always an element of myself or my experiences in whatever I do, but that's an interesting way of looking at it.
Well, it's
Huh.
fun because I mean, I found the most significant like leap I made was really because like, for example, Vana Chubbuck stuff, it's hugely structural, which I found very like almost the death of acting in some ways. But the very last lesson is the only lesson, which is let it go.
Hmm.
And that's when you build a structure, it's the hardest part because everything's like, well, when they say that, you've got to feel like this, and you've got to think about that, and you've got to be doing. Whereas the real acting comes from just being like, all right. And I did some improv classes, and that really freed that up to
Hmm.
just go. And then if you can build that into the other things of like,
Yeah.
I guess, sorry, off topic. I'm like saying the most connected I am is when I can find the parts of me that are that guy or that person,
Hmm.
and so if he's angry all the time, I've been angry. I can be angry. I can be over it. Why does that happen to me? What does it happen? What's happened to this guy to make him be angry like that?
Hmm.
What might be a scalable thing, or how could I scale up something if I don't have it? Like, like your kid dies, touch wood, no thanks. But I mean, my mom died. I can reframe. I can take my kid, what my love for my kid, and maybe put a, it's sort of like making a little goulash. You'd be taking a
Yeah.
piece of this and then raising that up and seeing what happens. Um, and that's
What happens when the writing doesn't offer enough for you to go, I understand, like it fails in the department where it's like this guy's always angry, but the writing just isn't there to
doesn't
really
support
earn.
that.
Yeah.
Look, with respect to great writers, that happens a lot.
Yeah.
Like depends. Like obviously, it doesn't happen to Brad Pitt so much, but like with me, I've been in a ton of different movies. Some are extremely really well written, and some are, I wouldn't even say they're poor. Like every act of art is a challenge and an achievement. So
Yeah.
like I don't ever rag on someone because I was like, but yeah, like sometimes it is harder to build the connections, and you're like, oh, so you just that's what you did. So I mean, I have two choices there, and I either go, hey, look, looking at who this guy is, and I've done this a ton of times. I like the writer or director, whoever's in charge at this point in time. I will respectfully kind of go before time, hey, I hope this isn't crappy because I'm hoping to learn something or we can collaborate in some way. And I'll usually go, here's these scenes or whatever it is. I'm feeling like maybe based off what you've got here, he would maybe do that or this. And I like to think I'm smart enough that I go, well, I don't want to just be like, he wouldn't go and that changes the entire story. He wouldn't go on that adventure. But you're like, okay, so he is going on this adventure. So maybe by the end of the scene, he goes off with this guy, and you wouldn't never go off with this guy. Like this guy's my character's extremely nervous. He doesn't trust anybody, and then this guy he's never met before. He just goes off with him. I'm like, all right, well, like, well, you're just like, okay, well, how about it? Maybe this, or earlier on, you say something about him that means that he's primed for something like this, and he's just
Mm.
like, stop telling yourself no, just do it, or whatever it is. I try to like, how do I build this into the most
Yeah.
complete thing it is? And either and I try to say this openly. I'm like, so either like you go, oh, I didn't think of it that way. That's sick, great. I was sorry, I was so busy with this like part of the story, or just trying to get it made, or whatever it is,
Mm.
or I, or it wasn't clear, or whatever. And we build that together because for me, I'm like, I guess my position is because I'm a people pleaser. I don't like to do things that might upset someone,
Right.
but I do recognize that in some ways, as the actor, you are the last best hope for the character.
Mm.
Like as soon as I've done it, it's done. Like I guess the editor as well, with respect, but
Yeah.
like I am in terms of narrative interpretation, I'm the last line
Yeah.
of defense to make sure that character's who they're meant to be.
Right.
So I guess with that in mind, I try to go, hey, uh, here's some thoughts I've had in reading the character singularly, not because you're across whole stories and across every character. I'm just zeroed in and in.
Yeah.
Like I'm hoping one of two things happen. You either go, "Oh, yeah, cool," or not that. In fact, actually, that you've made a good point. Not this, but there. And I'm like, "Oh, that's also good. Let's do that one." Or they go, "Hey, idiot, this is why you're wrong." Which, like, for example, in like by the end of Spartacus, for the first season, I was like, "Oh, yes, sir, whatever you need." By the end, I felt a bit more ownership, and I was like, towards the end, I was writing to Steve of the Night, being like, "Hey, this, and this," and you almost universally, like up except for like maybe one or two smaller examples, he was like, "I'll tell you why that's not the thing, because this," and he's amazing. He's always right. But the best part of that was I was like, "Oh, of course, I missed that."
So you
And
learned
so,
in the
like,
process of, but
yeah, because
yeah.
it's not about being right. It's about making sure the story is the best it can be. So,
Right.
like, I'm not trying to go, like, I know some actors might be like, I want to say some more words. No, whereas I respected like Dustin, who would be like, I wouldn't talk here. And I was like, cool. No, you probably wouldn't. That's awesome. That's how selfless in a way.
Mm.
Like, but in terms of like, because I usually think if I don't get something in the script, it's either because there's some element missing, or something not formed quite right, or in
Right.
some way, or I'm misinterpreting something. And either way, I'm hopeful that if I can find those things, it's a win for the story.
Yeah.
It's either a writer coming back to me and going, I remember how in the first scene that I'm like, oh yeah, of course, that yes, I'm so sorry. That's of course what it is. Or them being like, oh, I missed that. I didn't. Yes, we should connect those dots
Right.
or something. And then and to me that's like the joy of writing, or the joy of storytelling, is that collaboration where you can
Yeah.
fold the steel together, and
Yeah.
where you can do it
100%.
with like small enough ego. You can do it with like, you're like, I want this to be great, you want this to be
Yeah.
great, how do we make it great? It's already great because it exists. How do we make it more great if it can be,
And being able to find those relationships are so, like, where you feel so comfortable that you put an idea out knowing that it's going to be better by the people in the room. Like when you can find that, it's just like, that's magic. That is one of those things
Yeah.
that you'd want to hang on to, like those kinds of people. It's rare though. It's hard to find.
Yeah, I know. It's like, I don't know. I've had reasonable success. Like, I'm very lucky. Like, I try to. my mom was an antique dealer, and she was a real people person, and she was like exceptional at making everyone in a room feel comfortable. Like she had a
Nice.
great way of massaging relationships and
Yeah.
being who people, like being a bit of a chameleon in social situations. And
Mm.
I think I've absorbed some of that. I'm not as good as she was, but where and I think I've also got some more like, no, this is how it's got to be for me,
Mm.
in the right moments. But like I've been in some sets where I'm like, ooh, but I try to use that I learned from mom and to be like, hey, like you're this kind of person, so I need to speak to you this way.
Mm.
Like you're about facts and specifics, and I'm like, look, even budgetarily, I'll tell you why this could work. Like you can cut out this, and you don't have to put it in that situation. We can just put it in we can put it in a bar. You got that bar from that other set. We could set it there,
Is
and it can just be a
the
chat. And you're
banking
like, oh
experience
yeah,
coming back again?
you know but it's like, so it's like, I don't know, I try to make put people at ease. Doesn't always work, but like, because that's the thing. I again, like the good part of people pleasing as a nature, often it can be self-damaging if you let it, but like the good part of it is you are like always trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes, and everyone wears a different shoe, so like you can, if you can do it, if you can protect yourself and do it, it can be actually quite useful, so
Well, I
you
mean,
can kind of go,
you're talking. I mean, it sounds like I would agree that you inherited kind of your mom's, like, the man that I know when we've talked, like you've definitely
yeah,
inherited that. I think people pleasing, that it is the danger, but what you're talking about is like a servant's heart, right? Like
sure, sure,
and that sounds kind of like what your mom did, like making
yeah.
people feel comfortable, and I think, yeah, I mean, we don't want to be people pleasers, but at the same time, I think that's such a positive trait of yours. I when
Oh, it's
we hung out that one time when it was,
yeah.
when was that? It was it's canceled now, that show. What is it? the gaming
Oh, which show was this? Hang on,
in
when
LA,
hang on.
wasn't it in LA? We keep come and hanging out
You
that.
mean where we went to your where you went to your place or whatever it was?
Yeah, I can't even remember what show that was, but anyway, I mean, that was such a great example that you'd worked all day, and then you had to pick up all these supplies, and you just come and
Oh, yeah.
hang out of that weird hippie Airbnb that I was staying at. And
That was wild.
that was a great time, man. Like, that really, that spoke a
Totally.
lot about, I think, you as well, that you care for people, and I really value that in you, actually. And I think that's
I
such an
feel the same way about you.
interesting, that probably does help with your characterization about empathy and thinking of others. I think it's almost fundamental.
Well, that's the funny thing about like people pleasing. I remember like the first time someone was like, "Oh, it's such a shame they're like a real people pleaser. That's going to be bad." And I was like, "Sounds counterintuitive. Like I like
Yeah,
making people like I like people to be happy. Why would I not?" Like it's just
yeah,
I guess, and as people explain it, I was like, "Oh, you're talking about something else." I think like
yeah,
people pleasing to your own detriment. Like,
yeah.
from that, the best thing I got, like the best way to frame it, with that acting coach who was super severe, he was always trying to push into me, be more selfish.
Mm.
And I was like, gross, yuck. Like that is the antithesis of who I am. I don't want anything to do with that attitude. And he was like, no, you have to be. Like you have to, as an actor, you have to protect yourself, do your work,
Mm.
respect yourself. And but he framed, the word selfish was such a triggering word for me. I was just like,
Interesting.
I don't know. I'd argue with him about it forever. And then I was on a flight one time, and they were doing that thing where they were like, fit your own mask before helping others. And I was like, so that you can help them if they can't help themselves,
uh,
you've got to be able to breathe. If you can't breathe, you're no good to anybody. And it
Interesting.
was in that moment that I was like, that's what he means. Be
Mm.
selfish enough to take the mask to fit yourself so that you can fit three other masks. If you're dead and that guy can't reach their mask,
Right.
both of you are dead. So I
Yeah.
was like,
Interesting.
that way I can, selfishness in that context made sense to me. I was like, oh, make sure that you are able to help others. If you are not, if you give so much of yourself away
Mm.
that you run out of self, you have a breakdown, something like that.
Yeah.
What good are you? You aren't thinking long term. You aren't thinking about, if you want to people please, if that's the way you want to be as a human
Yeah.
being, if that's who you are as a person, you're doing it wrong.
Yeah.
So it's not
Well,
not the people pleasing that's broken.
yeah. It's interesting because it's like what you're talking about is is leadership, right? Like you take leadership,
Sure, yeah, yeah,
but you're also a servant, right? So you have
yeah,
to. It's kind of that duality that I think that's that spot that you're talking about. It's not people pleasing. It's like taking
no, no,
leadership,
no.
but serving people through that leadership, which I think is it's such a delicate balance, you know.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's fine. My first boss, I was working at Village Cinemas, the cinema chain I was working at up until Spartacus,
That's
and I
crazy. I
remember
love
like
that story, by the way. That's a
it's
great
so
story.
crazy. My first boss there, he was probably, if not, he was the best boss. They had a couple of good bosses actually, but he was the best boss. Yeah, he used to sing in like a crazy underground Australian band that I used to listen to, and I was like, him really?
What were they
There's no
called?
Mogul.
What were they
They were
called?
called Tism. Tism.
Tism.
TISM.
Okay.
I can't remember what it stands for, but it's probably not in there. It's probably not safe for work, I imagine. But yeah, it was like in the band, they're all like, 90s style, like,
Yeah.
dreadlock, not dreadlocks,
Mohawks.
mohawks and
Yeah.
colored hair. And I was like, and he was at work, he was just like, just trim, but it was fun.
Amazing.
But he was the guy that when he was like, because obviously he had things, KPIs to hit, and he was like, we got to sell more popcorn, guys. But he would sell more than anybody. Anytime he asked for something, he would do it better than you. He was always he'd put his office away, he'd come out the front, serve the hell out of people, do
Nice.
everything, and you were like, man, he is so much better at this than me. Of course, he's my boss. Whereas future
Yeah.
bosses frequently would be like, go out and do more, and I'm like, how? And they're like, the way we taught you, and you were like, I mean, you're not doing it, and that's fair enough. I mean, like, not every boss can work the line, as it were, but like,
Mm.
I always remembered respecting a guy who was like, I'd roll up my sleeves and I will
Yeah,
hit this.
totally.
I will
It
show you. You don't think you can do that? You don't think you can sell X amount in an hour? Watch
watch.
this. And you're
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
good Lord.
It's
So
that
I guess you can.
it's that perfect pairing of this is something that I really like too in people for like a test of character is do their words and their actions match, you know? And to me
Absolutely.
that's where the rubber hits the road. And that guy sounds like a perfect example of that. It's like, yeah, I ask you to do it, but I can also do it and I can do it a bit better, which is so inspiring.
Yeah, let's say, I mean, like, there's a reason. It was also that sense of like, there's a reason I'm here. Like,
Yeah.
there's a reason I'm running this.
Yeah.
Because it was like a lot of the times I'd find bosses, and it's true in the industry as well. Like, there's a lot of times you'd look to the boss, to whoever's in charge of the set or the production or
Yeah.
whatever, and you'd be like, so you're telling me to do all this stuff for this price, and you want me to do this and this.
Mm.
I don't see you working this hard. Like,
Yeah.
and then there are
That's
other
tough.
people who are like in there every day, making sure, like, respectfully giving everyone all the tools they need. And you're like,
Mm.
for you, I would cross the Rubicon, like,
Yeah.
so,
It's so
well, I
nice when
feel like this
you
is what you're doing here with Vast Visions. I feel like you are trying to lead creatives to
yeah.
a place where they can create more freely and with better stuff. And I
Yeah,
appreciate that.
absolutely. No, thank you, man. It's been, I feel like creative industry's tough. I came from
It's not pressure.
independent comics and then I went into like corporate games and like that was rough, man. I'm not gonna lie. That was a rough and we've talked about that. Like it was
Yeah, it's a ooh,
coming out the other end. I was like, how,
retrospect.
how do I help people that I saw were so gifted? Like take a shot on themselves, And I was just saying to Chris Avalon in the previous interview that I think we're entering that time now. The games industry is a bit rough, but I think we're going to see a lot of cool people come out of it going, I think I'm going to take a shot on myself. And I'm excited about that. I think we live in an interesting time creatively and
We
interested to
do.
see where it goes.
Well, it's a thing. Like, AI is obviously like an existential threat in many ways, but then, like, in some respects, like, if it doesn't destroy everything we love, then but there's that we like I had this weird, like, with that Sora thing that came out. I had every friend in the world being like,
Mm.
"It's over, it's the dream is gone, we're all dead in the water now, people." And I remember being like, I was like, looking at it, I was like, this is shockingly good,
Mm.
but also absolutely inept at what it is that matters.
Yeah.
But as a piece of technology, it's astounding. But then I was talking to some of my buddies, and I was like, well, you know what? Like suddenly there is a world where you are writing, you, Curtis, you write something, and as a proof of concept, you just spend the next 2 weeks refining a bit of
Yeah.
a rough guide of it, or even making it potentially. I
Yeah.
mean, it's, maybe you get me and a couple of your buddies and we act them out, and it's kind of like we put that into the system and it builds out a whole background and everything. And you're like, and I don't know if I like that world, but it
Yeah.
is certainly a world where, almost like indie games of the 90s, like, yeah, you can just build it yourself to a certain
Yeah.
extent. Like maybe it's not as quite as good, but it's like if the story is excellent,
Yeah.
with and you have your artist friends take it and revise it and refine it and improve it and put their own voice into it. And I don't know, I don't think it's the world I necessarily want to live in, but if it's the
Yeah.
world we're destined to live in,
I think
there is a
uh,
there's a freedom to it that might come with it as well, where the corporations can't go, but you need $200 million. You're like, I don't actually.
yeah.
I just need a computer.
I
You know,
think
and
my take on it is I think if anything it's going to push people back towards like the physicality of the tangible thing. We're increasingly moving into a place where we own nothing, we rent everything.
yeah,
Everything
yeah,
is a
that's
service, and it's
true.
like I think with AI, it's just going to be like people are going to crave going to an art gallery and buying something and putting it on their wall. That's my sense, and
Yeah, having
I
something real.
I would say anyone that has a real voice, like a real creative voice that has something meaningful to say from a life of struggle or beauty or whatever, uh, there's no threat to people like that.
Yeah, no, that's the thing, right? I think good stories will come out. Like you like, sure, somebody put like tell a funny story about a cat, and you're like, that's a pretty good story. I'm like, yeah, but it's so averaged. It is by definition an average. Like
Yeah.
so it's like even in this like hellscape post future world where everything is made in computer, there is
Mm,
still a narrator.
yeah.
There is still, like I don't see a world where an artist doesn't make it better.
Yeah.
Like at any level. Whether it's an actor bringing specificity and insight to a story rather than just like make it a guy who just does I don't know something. I guess that'll
Yeah,
do.
it's missing exactly what you're talking about. All the stuff you've talked about, Liam, all the stuff that goes into it, that doesn't go into it, and that's what's missing. And that's voice, that's experience, that's your life, the struggles that you've had. None of that goes into these things, right? It's a facsimile, it's a
Mm.
copy of real experience, and I mean, you can't so far, so far, you
Yeah,
can't.
yeah, yeah. Well, that's the thing. You don't know, right? That's the thing. I'm not sure. Like, I don't know what the future holds, but I know that at some point there's a progenitor of everything. Like there's a everything comes from something,
Yeah,
and so like I don't think that will be untrue ever. Like, I think the minute that becomes untrue for humanity, then there's no human. There's like the machines won. Like I think Judgment Day happened. I think as soon as a computer is deciding specifically what we like, then I don't think we really have a culture anymore.
yeah,
And
yeah.
I mean, hey, that's a choice collectively. I think humans will make together.
Yeah, exactly. I feel it's weird because I know a lot of guys in the games industry are really worried, and I get it. I mean, it
Yeah, like there
is.
is reason to be. There like
Yeah. Did
there will be less jobs.
Did you ever see?
That's
It was a film by Ari Folman. I feel like the Congress. Have you seen that,
no, I haven't.
dude? You have to watch the Congress. It's Ari Folman. He did a movie. Oh, 10 years. It was one of my favorite movies of that year,
Yeah.
called Waltz with Bashir, which is like an animated
Oh
documentary.
yeah,
Have you seen
that was
that?
still playing at my cinema when I was still there. I
Dude,
think.
so it was a follow-up film, and it's
Wow.
I think it came out like 2013 or something like that, and it's all about it's Robin Wright, the actress, and
Yeah,
so she plays
yeah.
herself in the film, and this whole
Oh,
thing is that she's getting older and her agent wants her to be young forever, and so the whole movie is about her getting scanned, and she sells her likeness
wow. That's
to
ahead of time.
basically, yeah, and it's a super trippy, and it's all about I basically this I have this joke called like there's intellectual property IP, this is like soul property, this is like the dark,
Yeah, sure.
this
Yeah,
is what
yeah,
we're
yeah,
getting
yeah.
into. But it's, dude, it's so good, and it's so now, you know what I mean. Check it
Wow.
out, man. It's really good.
That is
It has a
interesting.
really interesting
Yeah.
comedy about this, but yeah.
Pro tip.
I don't
Wow.
I haven't checked if there's any. Let me see here. I've been too into the
Oh yeah, do
conversation.
whatever you need to do. Like what? Yeah.
Let's see
So
if we have
I
any
talk a lot,
questions.
and like, nobody cares.
While I'm reading, I was thinking, how did you get into, like, 'cause you were working at the theater and then you were also doing
Hmm.
acting on the side. Like, where did you all of a sudden decide to? I'm just gonna go, like, screw it. I'm gonna do this. How did that happen?
Ah,
Like,
I yeah, I was studying. Oop, I popped the balloon. I was studying in Ireland because the longest story, all going back to my stepdad and my mom wanted to go to Ireland for a while. I had a chance to do foreign exchange, long the whole thing. Anyway, like in Australia, there's no like when you go to university in Australia, you just go, you go to your lectures, you go home, you submit your assignments, blah blah blah. At least in the experiences I've had, there's not like a whole culture. Like I'm not going to like rallies, and I'm not going to like the sports team and going rah rah and all that sort of stuff.
Right.
It's un-Australian.
Yeah.
But in Ireland, I know I would see movies in America where they're all going to like the college football games, and I was
Yeah.
like, what? like who would do that?
Yeah.
Seems like it's a whole thing. But in I went to Ireland and they had like a hallway of just stuff to do. And of course, I knew nobody because it was in another country.
Yeah.
And there was like there was the philosophy club and the debate hall, the debate club, and the arts club, and I
Nice.
joined everything. I joined everything. It was great.
Nice.
And I remember I went to the German club because I'd learned German at school. And I was like, I'll meet some Germans with my fancy German. And then after like 5 minutes, they were like, look, it's much better for us to speak English to you because your German is not that good. And our
Yeah.
English is much better. I was like, that's
Classic.
no way I can, guys.
That's why I'm in Sweden, man. That's just.
They're like, please don't worry about it. And then I went to, but there was an Irish girl there, and she was like speaking to them in German. They had no problem with that, did they? I was
Mm,
so angry. I hated that
yeah.
Irish girl.
Damn.
And I was like, "How dare you? This is my club." It's like its own little like weird movie. But anyway, so like I'm in this hallway and like just killing time, going like, "Wow, I haven't tried trampolining yet." I did join that. That was great. And then I was like, there was a post-it note
Yeah.
in. You gotta imagine an immense hall. It's huge. And one little post-it note amongst poster after poster after poster, and I was just like, "Huh." Auditions today, like whatever date
Yeah.
today, at a time right now in a room, the room behind me, and the
Wow.
door was ajar. It was like a real come to Jesus thing.
Damn,
And it
that's
was like,
amazing.
and I poked my head, like I was like, my instinct, because of me, I was like, let's see actors do dumb actor things, maybe laugh a little at their
Mm,
actoring this. Like, how silly. What a like imagine doing that for a job. How
yeah.
dumb. And so I was like, I'll have a cheap laugh by going and seeing people be like, oh, Horatio, what the, and you're like, what news? And you're like, what it is. And I poked my head in, and who was the director? But that Irish girl from the German class. So I was like, God damn it. And she was like, oh, Liam, have you come to try out for the acting thing? And I was like, absolutely not. You should not be. I'm not even here. Just pretend that door closed. I was never here. And she's like, again, people pleaser. She pulls me into this thing,
Yeah.
tells me the storm story about how nobody's auditioned and she really needs someone. I was like, I don't want to do any of this. And then it gives me this role of this Irish, I know this drunk English dude, drunk, don't know how that works.
Yeah.
And he was a comedian, not funny. And then he was like just abusing Irish. All his jokes were anti-Irish jokes. I was like, well, this will be great for meeting friends in Ireland.
And worse, he doesn't wear a shirt ever. You
And
gotta
just
take the shirt off.
never wears a shirt for some reason. Whatever. No, it's one thing I did get. Anyway, so I'm like, this is, and then like opening night, someone didn't turn up, and somebody's got the lines underneath the table. They're just reading them. I was like, I don't know much about acting, but I don't think this is how it's meant to work. and like, and I didn't. So then somebody didn't show up for a cue, and so it's probably it would seem like 55 years. But I don't know if you've ever done stage in your life. But if somebody misses a cue, it feels like the
Yeah,
entire world has stopped.
totally.
And I've never had that feeling before. So probably like 7 seconds, but it felt like forever. So
No,
I was like,
yeah.
someone's gonna fill this void. So I was just winging it, and then the lighting guy's like, "What? I don't know how to do." Some kid who's learning how to do lights is like, "Do I have to change? I've got a whole pre-programmed thing. What's this guy's not to be speaking right now?" And he told me later, he's like, "Never do that again." I was like, "I'm so sorry." And anyway, it was this whole situation. And then
Amazing.
like, and I hated it. I didn't hate it. She looked, and she was lovely in the end. And like, it was fun in a way, but I was like, oh, that was a horrible experience. And then at the end of the last night, it was like a 5 night thing. This other Irish dude's like, that was great. Did you ever think about doing some more? And I was like, no, I'm good. He's like, it's a Shakespeare. We really would like to see you audition for it. And I was like, Shakespeare. I like Shakespeare from English class. And then he was like, I was like, oh, cool. What Shakespeare is it? And he's like, Measure for Measure. I was like, never heard of it. See you later. And I was just like, and he's like, oh, please, we just need so. Anyway,
Mm,
again, people pleaser, went into all this thing, got me up there. And I was like, I'm not doing this And he's like, "Oh, would just love to hear you do the audition, just as hear it." I was like, "How does that help you? I'm
Yeah.
not doing it. So why do you want to?" He's like, "Oh, you know." Anyway, so again, he was like, "That was great. We can't find anybody. Can you do it?" And he taught me into doing it. And I was like, "If you find anybody else," and oh man, sorry, it's a long story now. I didn't mean to go that way.
That's all
And
right.
then yeah, so he like taught me, and then I like read it on the train back to my house. And it's like it's Duke turn. He's like he leaves in the first scene, which is what was promised to me by the director. He's like he just leaves in the first scene. I was like, I guess, or I mean, okay, I guess I could if you really need it. If you find anyone else, I'm out. Please tell me. And then like the next scene is the bad guy. Third scene, Duke, the character I would be playing, comes back disguised as a friar. And because I don't know how acting works at this time, I'm like, who plays him as a friar? Because this guy's in it for like 5 hours.
Yeah.
He's in every scene forever. This would be the worst thing you could ever want to do. I would hate this. And then I came back to him for like the first rehearsal or whatever, and I was like, cool, cool, yeah. I mean, I think I can handle this. So, but tell me, who plays him when he's dressed as a friar? Because that's right. And he's like, oh, that's you. I'm like, no, no, it's not. No, no. And he's like, yeah, well, I mean, you obviously you leave in the first scene, like I said, but then you come back in the third scene as a friar, you know, and then you just in disguise the whole time. And I was like, I will not do that. There is so I don't know, I don't want this. And he's like, well, we've done the flyers now, so. And I was like, and some part of my brain was like, that's it, Liam. It's a legal contract now. You can't get out of
Yeah.
that. That's
Yeah.
wires. You can't. I mean, so anyway, I did this, and it was like I was still learning it on the opening night. I was like in the
Wow.
in the mission. I was still like, get in my brain,
That's
go
horrifying.
in. It was horrific. And then, but then, like the fourth night or something, like the first Thursday, I think it was, and I'd never had an experience like this in my life. On stage, you can't do it. You can't really do it anywhere else because it's not immediate like stage is.
Yeah.
It's like the whole production, everyone was just on. It was just sync, you know, everybody was just with
Yeah.
each other and connected, and all the stuff flowed well. And it's the first time it's ever happened to me. I was lucky enough to have that a bunch of times since, but oh, and I just got off stage being like, I think that may have been a transformative, like that may have been the coolest experience.
Wow.
Did you guys feel that? Like that was, did we go somewhere? Did something happen? And then an Irish dude, one of the guys there was like, you just got the acting bug, didn't you? And I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, you know, you like that, didn't you? And I was like, I mean, it was all right. I don't know. But he's like, all right, welcome to the team, you know. And I was
It's
like, I don't
amazing.
think so. And from that day on, I was like,
Dude,
that's the
it's
coolest feeling ever.
it's so wild. Like I think to wrap it up, it's a perfect way to do it. Imagine the story where you didn't poke your head in that room, right?
I mean, but also by the same way of like destiny or fate or, you know, divine providence, whatever it is, nothing has shown me more that I had to do this. Like,
Yeah.
how impossible that, like, that series, like, my stepdad passed away, or I wouldn't have gone onto Ireland for my mum.
Yeah.
You know, I went to there so mum could be with where he was born. I went to this college. I had learnt German for no good reason. I'm in Australia. What am I doing learning German? I'm like, and I go to this German club to meet people who didn't want me to speak German, see a girl who was better at it. I was just like, ah. And then, like, in this room, I see a post it sized note in a hallway,
Yeah.
and it's exactly that time at exactly that moment with exactly that person. It, I don't know. I mean, of course, it's a coincidence if you want to look at it that way, but like, I can't imagine a more unlikely thing.
I
So,
know.
you know, it's just like,
Those are the great reflections. I feel very much the same way, you know, where I am with my life, like with my wife and
yeah,
my daughter. It's like all these, and it's funny because we look at our lives and we see so many failures or so many struggles, but it's like those things are genuinely led me to this place now. And you know, if people are ever despairing, and just know, like, yeah, man, it comes down the line. And like you said earlier, the stories are they're gonna close themselves out. You just got to be patient for it.
kind of right. Yeah, like you know, it's hard to learn. It's much easier to learn from failure than success, sadly. But
It's true.
it's worth learning.
Yeah,
Anyway,
absolutely.
was there stories? Have I talked too long? Was there
But
questions, or
no,
have I
no,
said?
no. I mean, we went over, but it's all good, man. It's
I'm so sorry.
it's all good, dude. It's been really awesome. I always love chatting with you, and
Me too, man.
we'll catch up soon. More about the
Sounds.
game you're working on, but I really appreciate it, man. And we'll talk
Thanks,
to you again
man.
real soon.
Take it easy, man.
All
Good
right,
luck with the rest of it.
thanks a lot, man.